Shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme no more yielding but a dream, gentles do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend.
Greetings and welcome to Gravity from Above. I'm Byrne Power, and some of you have been following what I've been doing or trying to do for many years. I am still hoping to finish up the Gravity from Above documentary, but in the meanwhile, I thought it might be interesting for you to see a little bit of how my interest in puppetry was formed and how I started doing puppet theaters in Alaska. So the first little video we're going to see is, it's not embarrassing footage, but it is primitive footage from the very first Lilliputian puppet sideshow in 2005 in Haines, Alaska. I hope you find it interesting. But let's go back a little bit before that. So where did my interest in puppetry start? I did not grow up with puppets, and in fact, it wasn't until I saw the films of Jan Schwenkmeyer and the brothers Quay in the late 80s, early 90s, that I began to feel this tug towards the puppet creature. Later, what I would do is I would find myself more attracted to these kinds of images. For instance, I made a film with some Alaskan friends, which was more based on my time in New York in terms of style and technique, purposely corroded technique. But in terms of one of the main characters, well, the only main character, had a mask, wrapped bandages with glasses, and for some reason, that was also, I would consider it somewhat in the vein. I did a small puppet show with a student of mine for some friends, and it was the attack of the 50-foot woman, and came up with some interesting shadow illusions for that. And by this time, in around 2003, 2004, I was very interested in puppetry. Now, elsewhere I've gone into more detail about how I explored puppetry. But one of the biggest things was the trip I took in early 2005, a trip which cost me my job at the radio station through no fault of my own, and also a trip which I started with a broken wrist, which eventually had to be taken off in France, a very interesting story all by itself. But I came across, for instance, the character of Guignol, and I saw the way children still in France to this day were going crazy in the presence of this actual living figure. And I realized that puppets could do something no other art form could in our times. They could be, in fact, not virtual, but real, in three-dimensional space. This was further confirmed to me when I went to the International Puppetry Institute in Charleville-Mézières and saw the students there performing. A couple who really spoke to me. One was Julia Kovac from Hungary. Another was Aurelia Ivan from Romania. And I've kept up with Aurelia over the years, and fantastic and fascinating performer and thinker. Another thing that really opened doors for the idea of puppetry was the group Buchty a Lotki, Cakes and Puppets, in Prague. And their approach to puppetry was what I thought we could do in Alaska. They used just what looked like material found outside in the backyard or something. And I said, we got lots of material laying around in Alaska. Let's use some of this and make a puppet theater. And so I went from Buchty a Lotki. I came back not having a job, hoping to get unemployment, which I eventually did because they ruled that my boss was unfair to me, which he was. But I had some objects I had already collected, including a baby that I found at the Salvation Army, which I, shall we say, Schwankmeyerized and gave it all sorts of strange character. I had also, in the backyard, I had been developing a scarecrow, which was quite a bizarre creation. I took a mannequin head, which I had, the same one which was on the scarecrow, and then I covered it in papier-mâché and made a figure out of that. These were experiments just to see what I could do with puppetry. Another thing I did was I would take light bulbs and create heads out of wood putty with them, and then paint them with the kind of enamel model paints. One of these, I called it the human turkey, would eventually show up in what I'm about to show you, which is this first very primitive puppet show I did in Haines, Alaska. Another thing I needed, now this was at the Southeast Alaska State Fair, and it happens once a year in the summer, obviously, in Alaska. Now, what's interesting is that Alaska is so big, they have 4 state fairs. So basically, Southeast Alaska in Haines, where I lived, Southeast Alaska is about the size of Florida. Land and water all included together. And yet there's only, about 75,000 people living there, more than half living in the state capital of Juneau. So only 2,500 people in my community, but we would get up to 1,000 extra people coming in for the fair. So I went up to the fair people and said, hey, can I do something for the fair? And they said, sure. And they put me in this, they actually had a circus tent, and you'll notice the lighting is very orange here. These are the colors of the circus tent. And we were in a section off the back. The most of the circus tent housed a miniature golf course. And we were way in the back. You could hardly find us. But you know, what we did was primitive. What I did was I realized I couldn't get people to do what I was seeing in Europe. They just didn't have the background for it. They were Americans. They weren't trained to do like philosophical puppet shows. They couldn't do the kind of dark humor that the Czechs were doing. They didn't have a tradition like Guignol. So I thought to myself, what can we do? Well, I said, let's do something where anything can happen, and maybe even some of those things in the future. And so I came up with the idea of doing a fairground sideshow, the kind of sideshow where they would have sideshow freaks, and they would have dancing women, and they would have strange, kind of oddities and fossils and weird things. And I said that would be a perfect place for puppets. And so I found a handful of people, and I said, why don't you make a box, and why don't you do a puppet show? I found a friend from Belgium who did this for me. I went to another woman. I said, why don't you do a show? There was one girl named Susie who had done puppets before, and she did this wonderful miniature puppet show about a fairy trapped in a cage with with straw. And I thought that was the highlight of the show. The rest of it went by in a blur, but we got enough good response from that we thought, let's go ahead and do this. Let's continue doing this. And so the next year, during the fair, we did it again. It was a much bigger show and much more well received. Suddenly people knew who we were, and then we started doing 2 shows a year, 2 big shows. But when we did these shows at the fair, we would do them over and over and over during the course of the fair. So we got pretty good at what we were doing. But again, the footage you're about to see, these are some of the posters that, again, very primitive posters. I actually do much better posters, and also here's a poster for, I did a library talk on puppets. I did another, different presentations that people came to. And, well, let's go ahead and watch this most primitive of all footage. The music, by the way, was composed by Len Feldman. You've been listening to it, and he was the town doctor. Played this little device that I have called a sonnet, which was a type of electric harmonium. Electric only that you plugged it in the fan blew. That's why you hear this during the whole thing. But it seemed to work exactly with the I wanted this to be funky, not just for children at all. I wanted it to be something no one had seen before. And I think we achieved that. It was definitely something very different. Anyway, let's watch it.
This is the all adult. Oh, you do have one, this one. Oh, good.
Oh, these are runs.
With popcorn, no less. Let us enter. The wonders of the universe await. Come, good people, come. Welcome to the Lilliputian Puppet Theater.
You just stepped on my cord.
I stepped on his cord. Thank you, Walter, but we're all friends by now. A submarine tragedy awaits us now. As the curtain rises, each one of us, you included, Paco.
Oh, okay.
I've brought with me some friends who would like to hear your wisdom on the media. You see, Paco here is a media expert.
I'm a media specialist.
As well as a blockhead. I know you forgot your line.
I told you I was not ready.
And yet you improvise all the time. I suggest this would be a good time for it.
Oh, okay.
Might I remind you that you're somewhat upset about people's obsession with...
Television.
Yes, the idiot tube.
Television.
The boob tube.
You're not watching enough puppet shows. You're watching television all the time. Let me get my head straight. There. There.
We all need a little bit of that, don't we, Paco? Are we ready for anatomical verisimilitude? The anatomical verisimilitude of the X-ray woman! You can see right through her to her very bones.
Yes.
She at least believes in fairies. The rest of them can't believe their own eyes. Isn't that a sad fate? I believe in... Clap your hands. Oh, they all believe in fairies. I think it's time for a counseling appointment. Fairy, we must all work together to put the fairy back to sleep. Fairy, go to sleep. Soothing toast. Fairy, go to sleep. Fairy, go to sleep. It's time to go to sleep. Good night, Fairy.
Oh, you sideshow freak!
I'll be back for your counseling appointment later.
Freak! I'm not even coming out.
Please, come here. Wait. You must come out.
I'll show you my foot.
Your foot only?
Yes, it's a fine avian foot.
A freakish sort of foot.
You got feet like that, baby? No, I'm sorry.
Talons, no less. The human turkey.
Oh, I know.
How are things going there behind the curtain, turkey?
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
I never would, but I would look at the turkey behind the curtain.
Well, I think he has something to say to everybody.
Okay.
I'm not as much of a freak as you think I am, folks. I am indeed much more interesting looking than all of you are.
Put together, I say.
Can you open a beer with your hands? And they don't even make cans like that anymore.
They don't,
That's
do
a
they?
fat blue ribbon can opener turkey, buddy.
Anachronism is a horrible fate.
Close the darn thing. I'm done with these people. The human turkey.
A round of applause for the human turkey.
So there you are. Not much. I fully own up to that. And yet at the same time, that was the roots for more of what we would do. You have to start not knowing what you're doing in order to learn what there is to do. And next time we do a video, I will show you, I've got at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 more of these videos from my time in Haines, Alaska, doing puppetry there, that I think you will find interesting. So, I will see you again another time. Meanwhile, go check out the Gravity from Above essay site and read more about the history of this project. And like I say, I really am hoping to, if not finish it this year, get much further, much closer to the conclusion. Thanks. I'll see you later.
Popelem vám skalím hlavy! Bude